Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicole Miller. I am Principal Consultant of M&M Consulting and also Vice Chair of the New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition. And I'm so happy to be here co-hosting this e-mobility webinar with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. This is all about providing shared use electric transportation for your community. I'm very excited to have a range of dynamic speakers today to talk about this important point. Ideally, around e-mobility, we have awareness of the opportunities, availability, access, and infrastructure are the main things that we really want to focus on to make sure that these opportunities for equity are enhanced across New Jersey. Community mobility absolutely equals equity, and that's a prime component of all the work that we're doing for all the organizations represented here today. And we're happy to be co-hosted by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection and have several speakers talking about how we can implement some of these programs, as well as how we can find proper funding for them and build awareness in our communities around them. We'll have some speakers who are talking about programs that are already in motion and some other speakers who will talk about some of the ways in which we might find resources to bring these opportunities to your individual community. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up, so if you do have questions, please do put them into either the Q&A or into the chat. We will be monitoring those and holding most of those questions for the end, where we'll have Q&A at the end. And we do ask that you remain engaged and really focus on how these programs can be implemented within your particular areas. So we're talking about shared infrastructure. What are shopping networks? How can we bring neighborhood routes outside of bus lanes, home to transit opportunities, e-bikes for food delivery from food pantries, et cetera. All of these are potential opportunities. And so to kick us off, I'm going to start with Colleen Oropeza from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Colleen is an environmental specialist at the NJDEP. And she's been with the department since working in the Bureau of Mobile Sources. And so, Colleen, I'm going to pass it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, and thanks to NJPEEC for hosting. Hello, everybody. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us and listen in. My name is Colleen Oropeza. I am an environmental specialist at DEP. I am so happy to talk with you all about e-mobility today. I've been managing this program at DEP since very early in its development, and we've come a long way since then. We're still working our way through and learning more as we work through different projects and as different ideas and new technologies come out. So here's a quick agenda slide. We are going to talk about e-mobility background, purpose, and models. I'll also go through DEP's own e-mobility grant program. And then we'll talk through a local government and a community-led e-mobility project in action. We'll discuss other funding opportunities and resources. And then, as Nicole mentioned at the end, we'll have some questions and discussion. You can go to the next slide. And you can go to the next slide. Thank you. I want to start with some level setting for this conversation by giving some background on e-mobility, which for us means equitable electric shared use transportation. Different e-mobility programs could have specific goals, but overall, these should be based on transportation needs identified by the community. They should provide additional modes of transportation that complement and don't replace public transit. They should be safe, reliable, convenient, affordable, and accessible to all users, and they should help improve air quality. So to get more specific about what e-mobility actually is, I want to break up our definition that we have and talk a bit about each part, starting with shared use transportation. And this is just as it sounds. It's transportation services that are shared among users. This could be at the same time where there are multiple riders on a service simultaneously. So public transit is a good example of this. There's also rideshare programs, or carpooling would be another example. It could also be services that are shared but not at the same time. So like a car share or a bike share service would be an example of that. And I will go through some more examples later on. Next slide, please. Next is electric. E-mobility in its simplest terms is electric mobility or electromobility. So these programs use electric vehicles. In New Jersey, the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And these these contribute to climate change, which show up as rising sea levels, more extreme weather events, and as we could see today, hotter temperatures. Um, they also are a big contributor towards other pollutants that have really harmful effects on the environment and human health. And all of these stressors are disproportionately impacting our overburdened communities. So by transitioning our transportation sectors to electric, oh, you can go back one slide, please. Thank you. By transitioning our transportation sectors towards electric vehicles, we're helping to address these issues because all electric vehicles don't produce any tailpipe emissions. Let me just see here. The state has a ton of ambitious electrification goals. Some include transitioning New Jersey transit buses to electric. Others have to do with the state-owned fleets. But a majority of them are focused on personal vehicles and public charging stations. So getting people to swap out their gas car for an electric. But we know that 11% of New Jersey households don't own their own vehicle. And that could be for a number of reasons, whether it's the affordability of the vehicle, their ability to drive. So maybe they don't have a driver's license, or maybe it's just not practical for them to own a vehicle because they live in an area with limited parking. Whatever the case is, we want to make sure that all residents have access to the benefits of zero emission transportation. And this is where e-mobility starts to fit in. You can go to the next slide. So now we'll get to the equitable part of our definition. Equitable transportation considers the needs of all users. So all abilities, all races, all ages, all cultures, all incomes. E-mobility can be a really dynamic way to meet these needs, but only if equity is considered from the beginning and throughout the process. Some things to consider are the location and timing, so where and when a service operates. The affordability, can everybody afford the service? Maybe low-income users would need a ride subsidy or a discount in order to be able to use the service. And then is the service accessible and is it safe? So can users of all abilities actually get to and use the service? Is signage provided in the spoken languages of the community? Is the area well lit? These are all just some things you can consider when making sure your program is equitable. Next slide. Next, I want to go over some examples of project models for e-mobility, and these are just to give you an idea about what's out there. It's certainly not a conclusive list. There's definitely more models out there. We're seeing more as time goes on, and then some projects even include more than one model in one project. So the first there is microtransit. This is a demand responsive service with flexible routes. And we'll actually have some real examples of this later on, so I won't go into too much detail here. The next is car sharing, which is a shared vehicle. So this is different than your typical like car rental service where you'd have to go to a storefront and fill out a bunch of paperwork and rent a vehicle for days at a time. This is more short term, it's more flexible. You might be able to rent a vehicle by the hour, for example. Say you need to go to the grocery store and you don't have a car, but you don't want to take the bus because we can imagine carrying groceries on a bus is not very easy. So car share would be a good way to fill that need. And it's often done through a mobile app. And I think most people are familiar with shuttles and fixed route transit services. These are vehicles that pick up multiple riders along a designated route at set times. They usually use higher capacity vehicles like vans, all the way up to full-size buses. And then the last example I have here is an e-mobility hub. This is one location that houses a variety of models. So this is to promote connectivity between mass transit and help fill those first and last mile gaps. So getting from your home to the bus stop, for example, or getting from the bus or train station to your work, those are those first and last mile transit gaps. An example of an e-mobility hub could be like a parking area in a community. Maybe it has public charging stations. Maybe it has a few car share vehicles to rent, bike share docks, and some amenities for people to use while they wait. There's no set design for an e-mobility hub. It's really based on the needs and preferences of the community. Next slide, please. DEP has our own grant program to fund e-mobility projects in New Jersey. This funding could cover EVs and charging stations. It could cover program development and operation, or property and property upgrades. And program operation, that could mean relying on a subcontractor or a consultant to actually run the e-mobility service. So a lot of towns, community organizations don't have the resources to do this themselves. There's a lot that goes into it between planning routes, seeing what elements you need. So rely on those experts, talk to the mobility service providers, talk to other organizations that have done this, and see if maybe a subcontractor would be more beneficial for your program. We don't have a set funding source or a dedicated funding source for this program, so we do accept proposals on an ongoing or rolling basis. And then when we do get funding, we look back at all of the proposals we received to see if any are favorable and meet the parameters of the funding. Sometimes if we do get a specific funding source, we will announce a solicitation. So this would have set requirements. It would have a hard deadline to apply. And then once we reach that deadline, we'll go back and review the proposals and see which ones best meet the parameters. And we know that these projects can vary greatly in scope and budget. So we don't have any funding caps for this program. It is, however, helpful to know if your project is scalable. So, for example, can it be launched with less vehicles or a smaller service area if we happen to have less funding but still want to try out a pilot of the project? And opposite of that, can it be scaled up with more vehicles or a bigger service area if we do have extra funding available? And then at the bottom is a link to our recently developed program overview document. This has a ton of background information on the program. It has more definitions about the different models that are out there. And then it also has a guide for what to expect throughout the proposal process and then the grant agreement process if you are awarded. Next slide. An idea we are looking to add to our e-mobility program is funding for planning type activities. So as a preliminary measure to an e-mobility program, you need to figure out if it's something the community needs and wants. I think we often get caught up in thinking like, wow, we have this great program or this great idea. Let's see where we can make it fit. And that's sort of opposite to the general problem solving process, right? We should be identifying the needs and then developing solutions to try to fill those needs. So this is where this funding idea comes in. You'll see on our website and on that overview document that we generally prioritize projects that are shovel ready. So they've already done their research, they've done their community outreach, they have their project partners lined up, they have their budget prepared, they have everything that's going to go into this project. And we know a lot of communities, a lot of towns, they're not at this stage. In fact, very few are. So it does take a lot of resources to get there. And we imagine this funding opportunity going towards that initial step to determine if there's a problem and if e-mobility could be a solution that could help fit that problem. And it is possible that in your needs assessment or in your research, you find out maybe e-mobility isn't a good solution for your community. And that's fine, that's great. Then you know to go in a different direction with your solution, but at least you have that first step worked out. So there is a survey there with a QR code and a link. We'd love for you all to complete it to find out if you've done this type of research or needs assessment before and what went into that and how much did it cost and how long did it take. This will help us structure that funding opportunity. And you can go to the next slide. So next I'll share an example of a project currently operating in New Jersey. This is a government-led project. So Via Jersey City is an on-demand microtransit service that was launched in February of 2020. It's not exclusively electric vehicles, but Jersey City did receive a grant through our eMobility grant program to transition the fleet to EVs. Next slide. So as an on-demand microtransit service, the program uses a shared ride algorithm. So when riders book their trip, they are matched with other riders going in the same direction. And the cost of the service is similar to a bus fare. They do accept multiple payment methods, including cash, which helps ensure that more users are able to access it, regardless of if they have a bank account or not. And then when they do book their service, riders are given a virtual bus stop, which is usually within a few minutes walk of where they are. And that's where they'll go to meet their driver and the vehicle. They also offer curb-to-curb service for people with disabilities. Next slide. So the goal of the VIA program in Jersey City is really to complement the existing transportation and fill some of those gaps for the transit deserts in the city, which is why they have these established zones. So, for example, riders in the central zone, which already has ample transportation, it has major transportation hubs, it has reliable public transit. Riders booking in the central zone can only book a trip to that light blue outer zone. They can't book a trip solely within the central zone because their transportation needs are already being met there. Next slide. And VIA is the mobility service provider that the city partnered with through a request for proposals. VIA handles the logistics for the program, so they get the vehicles, they handle vehicle maintenance, driver hiring and training, they handle the algorithm and the app. And the fleet currently has 44 vans and 5 electric vehicles. And they plan to transition the entire fleet to electric in the coming years as the charging infrastructure needed for the program is expanded in the city. Next slide. And these next couple of slides have some metrics from the program. I'll just highlight a few of these. So in January, they announced reaching over 2 million rides with over 60,000 riders since launching. And the program has eliminated or avoided 5.3 million pounds of carbon emissions. Next slide. And they've also gathered data on who is using the service and how they're using it. So based on this rider profile, you could see that people are using it for the affordability. Most of the people using it are using it to get to work and other essential locations. A majority of the people using it don't have access to a personal vehicle, and nearly half of users are using it to connect to public transit. So the program is really working to meet those goals that they set out to accomplish. Next slide. And that concludes my part. If you have questions about eMobility or our grant program, my email is there. You can email me directly. We are going to have questions and discussion at the end, but if there's something we don't get to, you could reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you for that, Colleen. And as Colleen mentioned, we will have hopefully a robust Q&A session. I see there's already one question in the chat there. And we have another one as well in the Q&A. So please do put your questions in either the Q&A or the chat. We have our incredible assistants from NJLCV is going to be monitoring that and sharing that for us a little bit later. So first, let's move on to Ben Haygood with ILS. Ben is the Director of Policy and Partnership over at ILS, and he'll be talking about the Go Trenton program. So thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Nicole. Hello, everyone. Talk about Go Trenton. You can go and go to the next slide, please. So my name is Ben Haygood. I'm the Director of Policy at ILS. Like Nicole said, if you aren't familiar with ILS, we have been a community development and environmental nonprofit in Isles, Mercer County, and now around the state of New Jersey, working on several different things, but everything we do revolves around fostering self-reliant families and healthy, sustainable communities. So we do several things, including revitalizing communities, working alongside local residents to help plan their neighborhood's future, helping to develop an energy efficient and affordable and healthy homes. We train and educate both adults and youth through an alternative high school, a green job training center, and family support services. We build wealth through innovative financial services and loans that help create restore credit and increase savings. And then we promote healthy living by tackling some environmental hazards, fostering environmental issues and energy efficiency, improving open space, and expanding access to locally grown food. And working on these things, one of the primary things that I do besides Go Trenton is the work around lead hazard control and lead poisoning. We work on a number of other healthy homes related issues, but we encountered significant transportation hurdles and barriers over the decades. And so about, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago now, the founder of ISLES sat down with a few key colleagues and developed, started the thought process to develop Go Trenton. What is Go Trenton? We believe Go Trenton to be the first all-electric, affordable community-based rideshare program connecting Trenton residents to jobs, healthcare, and essential services. So like I said, we've been workshopping this from the very beginning, starting out at RMI with a few key organizations that we workshop this with out there in Colorado, including Environment New Jersey, Charge EVC, City of Trenton, and working further with DEP on this as well. DEP was out there with us on that. And again, working on the 3 different components of Go Trenton. Colleen talked about earlier several different definitions and several different models. So when we started workshopping this, we worked on what models were best. I remember working on car share a lot. That's not one of the ones we're currently doing, but we are pretty much doing everything else. We're not really having an optimal eMobility hub yet, but we're getting there. So 3 main components to the Go Trenton program are both the on-demand shuttles, the workforce and essential services vans, and then the charging stations or the infrastructure. And so we'll just run through those really briefly. But the on-demand shuttles are the micro-transit options, the on-demand services that Colleen was talking about earlier. And then the workforce and essential services vans are more of the fixed route services, both for pre-planned and hop-on services. And then infrastructure is really what brings it all together, not just the specific chargers themselves, but what's going to be required of the local utility provider to really get you up to where you need to be, which is sometimes the key to all this. Next slide, please. So the challenges when we started working on this, like I said, we're not a transportation company. I'm not a transportation expert. However, I would maybe even venture to say that I'm getting close to being one in electric rideshare programs. We encountered transportation as being the primary hurdle for folks that we like to work with, folks that we work with to accessing services that may be available, but otherwise unreachable without that mobility, that access. So you can see some of the stats here. I'm not going to read them all to you. Most of our folks, I think, are looking at other ad hoc ways to get to and from work. We're not cannibalizing on anything like VIA is doing with New Jersey Transit. We're working just to kind of augment those services. You can see the air situation here. Obviously, one of the other reasons we're doing this is not just access, but it's to clear the air as well. Just leave you with the staggering last statistic here on the slide, a 14-year mortality discrepancy for just 12 miles in Mercer County. Next slide, please. So here you see our primary shuttle or on-demand or micro-transit vehicle here, the Polaris Gem, and you also see our current coverage area. Discuss a little bit of expansion in a minute. Talking about a lot of things here, so trying not to talk too fast, but I'm always here for folks to talk about what Go Trenton is and what it could look like in your community, like different, with a different name on front, like Go Camden or Go Newark or whatever that might look like. So currently, our fleet is 4 of these shuttles and an ADA van, and that's a full higher capacity van. So not a minivan. That's a 12 capacity rear wheelchair access van. And we're, like I said, we're looking at expanding to cover more of this territory. We're not covering the entire city right now. As well, we're currently operating with hotspots. So on the front end or the back end, on the origin or destination of your point, you might have to walk a short distance to get there. But if you're going to a popular location or one of the, I think, in excess of 55 or so hotspots around the city right now, you're not going to even notice that because your pickup spot will be at your location, whether that's Capitol Health or the farmers market or something like the Trinity Soup Kitchen. You can see we launched late September, early October there. You can just go back one more there. See our hours of operation. We're currently operating 6 days a week, hoping to expand to that later. And then go ahead and go to the next slide now. Thank you. Thank you. And how does one go about hailing the ride? You're going to download the Circuit app. I'm going to give you a link tree, a QR at the end. You can snap with your phone if you'd like, and that'll get you to whether you're Google or Apple, as well as some of the coverage area and other pieces of information on there. So go to Circuit, and then you're going to have to scroll down and choose Go Trenton, and then you can, again, enter your pickup and drop off, number of passengers, et cetera. Next slide, please. So you can see some of the growth. We definitely have been almost, I want to say, consistently 30% month over month. We've had a few points where we've had some vehicles out of service, and that's kind of shifted a few of the trajectories. But you can see the consistent growth. We're well over 3,000. If you go to the next slide, please. And again, next slide, please. You can see this is just April, but May and June were well over 3,000 passengers. So again, rides is the number of times the vehicle is moving, and passengers, number of people included in there. However, you can also see our wait times are getting up on the. We want to stay below 10 minutes on there, and we're north of that now. Like I said, we've been working on constantly other ways to get funded. We didn't want to only cover half the city. We wanted to have a little bit more of a diverse fleet. We're working on those things now. Next slide, please. You can see just some of the other data. We'll run through a little bit of this real quickly here before I get into some of the other stuff. But you can see some of the more hot times and the hot areas. Obviously, middle of the day-ish. And then next slide, please. And then for the locations, if you can see that, a lot of Trinity Soup Kitchen, a lot of transit center, and a lot of the same other grocery stores, community centers, and healthcare. The things that we knew were there, why we created the service. It's great to see the data back you up on the back end. Talk about some of that in a second. Next slide, please. So I know you can't read all of this stuff, but just kind of talking through the nuts and the bolts from the beginning and the end. Phase 1 was planning to, infrastructure 3 was the pilot launch back in the fall of last year. Phase 4 is now piloting the essential services and the workforce transportation, and then 5 is the expansion. So just talking through those really briefly and trying not to talk so quickly, but again, I'm here for Q&A both at the end of this and make myself available with my email and I think cell phone at the end, but if not, I'll put it in the chat for anybody that has questions. But so phase 1 is when we were workshopping this program back in 17, 18, and 19, looking for what models worked best and what was the best practice in that model, kind of developing some of that along the way. Did over 100 on-the-ground surveys, walking around talking to residents, and did in excess of 3 to 4 smaller ones, but 3 to 4 listening sessions with the community to understand what was really needed. And then phase 2, the infrastructure itself, the chargers. This has been a big lesson learned, but we're really, I think, succeeding in the face of adversity in the sense that we haven't been able to really have our infrastructure in place in the way we wanted to, but we're getting it there. But it's really all about chargers and locations, both around the city and in our headquarters, and then identifying the right vendors, both for the infrastructure, the EVSE, the charging ports themselves. Our vendor is Flow, F-L-O, and then for our rideshare operator is Circuit, as you saw earlier there. And then again, we went through a very extensive selection and process for both the EVSE and the rideshare operator here. And also, I think, and are going through conversations working as we experience some of these extreme heat days, in addition, extreme cold days during the winter, what the optimal fleets are for those specific extreme weather events. And then phase 3 there, you see we launched back in September, October last year. We're using local drivers. We have, unfortunately, limited coverage area in the fixed points, but we're operating fare free for the community. And then phase 4, which is really now, we're in the process of about to soft launch what's known as the workforce and essential services vans. So we'll have, I'll get a picture of this in a second, but a full up 13 capacity, all electric. Again, everything we're doing is all electric here. We'll have a 13 capacity all electric Ford e-Transit van for both workforce transportation and essential services. We'll talk through a few of that in a minute, a little bit of that in a minute. But also in phase 5 is really coming with this next round of funding. We're going to be working to cover the entire city of Trenton, as well as maybe a few other transit deserts outside of Trenton as well. We're moving the fixed points, going to more of a door-to-door, curb-to-curb service, maintaining a free service at least inside the city of Trenton. That's the goal at this point. And then increasing our capacity really across the county, including, meeting with other organizations, and we're working on, various MOUs and MOAs to understand what works best with both local businesses and employers and organizations to help kind of fill their transit gaps, if you will. Next slide, please. See one of the vans there, the Ford e-Transit. So these are basically both workforce and essential services routes. They'll be taking Trenton workers to and from jobs in surrounding areas. We're working on that. It's a rather complex process, as I'm sure you can imagine, to provide workforce transportation, but also to get residents to necessary resources around the county that they may not be able to access on their own. And with the Go Trenton limited coverage area, they weren't able to get beyond, the limited footprint that we are currently covering and hope to expand. So again, this is for a variety of things, and we're working on several different organizations. But if you want to be one of those organizations, again, please feel free to reach out directly to me. But working on several different transportation services for educational and extracurricular programs, as you see here, in both employee transportation and essential services for both clients, both organizations, staff members, and their clientele. Next slide, please. So this is just a draft. I will say this is not finalized, but this is kind of an example of what one of the essential services loops would look like. Again, we'll be doing some specific out and about routes, fixed points from A to B and then back to A, but possibly looping in this loop as well, based upon what the computer tells us the smart ways to do this are. But this is an example of what one of the fixed route essential services loops that would be operating several times a day for several of the days of the week, where folks could hop on in a local eMobility existing hub like a Trenton Transit Center or Hamilton train station, and then get to areas like Capitol Health up in Hopewell, Quaker Bridge Mall, which has DCFC fast charging capacity, as well as can be pickup drop-off points for a various number of organizations that are trying to get their Trenton-based organizations or Mercer County-based organizations to and from specific resources and services that might be, e.g., the WIC Center out in Hopewell, and other things like that. Next slide, please. So just a picture of the flow charters we have in the back of our current temporary headquarters at Mill 1. Going to be we have been workshopping. We're going to be installing some winter options to make sure we don't have this snow and ice coverage over the winter. This is a suboptimal way to operate, obviously. You can see a QR code here that will get you to the Flow app if you want to utilize these public chargers. Next slide, please. And this is the QR code that I referenced earlier with my email, and my phone number is not on there, so I'll drop it in the chat here as soon as I'm done talking. The QR code, again, will get you to the link tree where you'll be able to get to the App Store for whether you're Apple or Google, and then download the Circuit app to utilize the free transportation that we currently provide in a limited area in Trenton, but currently we'll be providing for the entire city of Trenton. as well as you can see the coverage area and the Go Trenton website and a few other things there on the LinkedIn, or on the link tree, excuse me. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you for that, Ben. And thank you all for joining us again for this eMobility webinar. Anyone who has just recently joined us, please know this session is being recorded and we will be making the recording available. Thank you, Ben, for that outline of Go Trenton. It's very exciting to see the work that you all are doing down in Trenton. I'm excited by the possibilities, not only for a full citywide vision as Go Trenton has, but also what people can do in even more micro setting within their neighborhood, connecting communities. So I live in Newark, so maybe in my section of Newark, which is Vailsburg, it might be a Go Vailsburg, as opposed to the entire city of Newark, which would be a lot for a small community to take on. Exactly. So we're really limited only by your imagination. What can you think of on a small level or a larger level, et cetera? And so we do want to move on to our next speaker. I'm so excited to introduce Melissa Miles, the Executive Director of the New Jersey, excuse me, the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance. Melissa, we will let you take it from here. Oh, and if you have questions, please do put your questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. We will have a Q&A session at the end of all of our speakers. Thank you. Melissa?
Thank you for that introduction, Nicole. So glad you're excited to see me. I'm excited to see you and to be here with you all. Thank you for inviting me. And, you know, I, like most of you who are out there in the listening and watching audience, am here to learn. So I was really, you know, grateful for the presentations by Colleen from the DEP and Ben from ISLES, because they have, you know, launched some of the initial e-mobility programs in the state. And although, you know, our e-mobility programs are still, you know, just sort of transitioning out of the pilot stage, I really hope that they will be models for many other communities around the state. So as Nicole mentioned, I'm Melissa Miles, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance. And I'd like to really thank my organizing staff for contributing to this presentation. They're really the ones that are kind of in the field, talking to communities every day, which, you know, help to inform this. I also am not an expert on e-mobility, but, you know, I'm here to sort of contribute a little bit, I think, to the conversation and the perspective on why it's necessary. And, you know, the main two things that I think we are going to need to make this a commonplace thing throughout New Jersey is capital and courage, with, as Nicole said, some imagination. Next slide, please. So what is environmental justice? You know, I looked at the list of participants, and I know many of you are very familiar with EJ. We have a QR code that links to the actual principles of environmental justice. And then, you know, I like to just tell people that environmental justice is really a community's right to speak and advocate for themselves, and to be able to have the resources necessary to create the future that they envision for themselves. So it's just you know, environmental work from the ground up in communities that are most impacted by legacy of environmental degradation, and, you know, really through their own vision and through their own effort, you know, being able to catalyze a change in their own community with the support of partners and allies. Next slide. So how do we relate as an EJ organization to greenhouse gas emissions? Well, we definitely acknowledge the impact of greenhouse gases on the changing climate, which we're, you know, currently seeing, you know, real time. I never thought that I would have to say to staff who take public transportation, you should probably stay home, because so many of our systems are just not prepared for the type of heat we're seeing. And we know that it is, you know, because of the the mining and the burning of fossil fuels that we are currently facing a crisis of this magnitude. At the same time, when you have greenhouse gases, where you have those kind of emissions, you often have what we refer to as co-pollutants. And co-pollutants are the pollutants and the emissions that are most harmful to the people who are closest to the source of the emission. So unlike greenhouse gases, which are impacting the entire planet, the co-pollutants are going to be most harmful for the folks closest. And so in the for transportation, that's going to be folks living closest to railways. So we have some of those those like those pollutants, and then some of the health impacts here in our slide. Next slide, please. So, when we talk about transit systems, and I think it's been pretty well laid out, the first question is who is it actually working for? So safe, clean, reliable, accessible, affordable, these are the elements that we need sort of across systems that touch our communities, everything from housing and green space and energy to transportation. It's sort of all the same set of qualifications that's going to determine whether or not it really works for communities. So, the question here is, how do we create accessible local transportation while also protecting people from the health harming impacts of greenhouse gases and the other pollutants that come along with it. So, as was stated, there are many, many options, more than could probably fit on this page. And, as was also stated, different communities have different needs. For example, I love watching people on electric scooters. I myself will never get on one. And, I remember living in a community where, although it was a small community, you could not walk from one side of the community to the other. If you had groceries, if you were pushing a stroller, if you were not completely mobile, there was no way that you could get to the other side of the community. You had to have a car, you had to call a taxi, buses did not run from one side to the other. So, different communities, depending on their makeup, and different people, honestly, will need different solutions. So that's going to be a big part of this. And so there's a QR code there for a DOT, Department of Transportation toolkit, and some funding resources for urban electric mobility infrastructure. Next slide. So part of the reason that I think I was asked to make a presentation here is because of the role that my organization has been trying to play in New Jersey, making sure that community-based organizations, whether they be environmental organizations or not, are aware that, through the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that there are several $1 billion in climate investments and funding coming through the federal government. Now, while most of that is we're going to see kind of in tax credits and, investments that are going directly to businesses, there is quite a bit of it, several million that is slated to go sort of directly into communities if everything goes correctly according to plan. And so some of these is formula funding that's going to the states or going to municipalities, going to agencies like the Department of Environmental Protection. And then there are other grant programs that are open to community-based organizations, universities, partners. So the Communities Change Grant is one of them that many folks are highlighting right now, and you may hear more about that in the next presentation by the We Act Technical Assistance Center. But this is one that many organizations throughout the state are currently applying for, and there are many more. As a matter of fact, I'll put in the chat that, you know, besides for this program, you know, there's also the federal EV tax credit program and about a dozen other opportunities that you can find through the government grant search engine. So I just dropped that into the chat. Next slide, please. And as I just mentioned, a really great resource for Region 2. And Region 2 is just our EPA region, which is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands. We have the WE Act for Environmental Justice's Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center, also known as a TICTAC. NJEJA is one of the New Jersey TICTAC partners, and the other is the South Ward Environmental Alliance. So if you follow our socials, you may see us sort of posting about different webinars and opportunities to learn more about federal funding, and also to sort of build out your, if you are from an organization that doesn't necessarily have an environmental or climate focus, you can begin to build out that work. Honestly, everybody's going to have to get involved. You know, all organizations that sort of touch community in some sense or another are going to, if they're not already, going to be, you know, dealing with the impacts of, you know, climate and environment if they're not already. So, you know, now is the moment where organizations that, you know, may not have been in this work before can begin to strengthen that muscle, can begin to work together with their communities to identify the needs, the issues, and the potential projects that you know, their communities may benefit from. So the TICTAC is here to sort of help organizations along that path with different offerings. And my colleagues from WE Act will be speaking next, so I won't go too deeply into this, but every region has their own TICTAC. So if you have colleagues in other regions, if you are interested in applying for federal funding and sort of figuring out, you know, what are the climate and environmental impacts in your area that you should be thinking about doing work around, the TICTAC is going to be a great resource for that. Next slide. So what are our next steps? So, you know, as you all know, I think this webinar just shows us all that there is a lot of movement happening on e-mobility. Again, it's really going to take courage, I think, on the part of organizations and everyday people. A lot of the groundwork has been laid by the federal government and the state. You know, there are funding programs, there are pilot programs. We just need to be able to stimulate interest in our local, you know, amongst our local entrepreneurs to begin to pick up some of these projects. And in addition to e-mobility, all sorts of projects that intersect with the clean energy economy. And, you know, most of the folks on this call, you know, come from organizations that are doing this type of work. So I think our main call to action is, you know, kind of keep your, you know, your work moving forward. Don't give up. It's very difficult. I think there's a lot of, you know, we talk often about how our sector doesn't necessarily have yet the ear of the people. You know, it's very difficult to do community level work. It takes years of relationship building before you can sort of start doing projects. It's not something that can happen overnight, but you know, it seems to be a necessity that we sort of, you know, try to really drill down with our work to the community level and begin to, you know, incorporate organizations and individuals who are not currently part of the choir. And while that's challenging, you know, I think it's the only way that we're really going to see multiple projects like this roll out. We have to tap into other sectors. We have to go beyond sort of our environmental climate cohort and work with folks in the private sector, you know, entrepreneurs, in order to make this all happen. So, you know, ultimately, I think although time is not on our side, we have all the pieces that we need to begin to build out this puzzle. And, you know, working together, I really think we can make it happen. Next slide. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and pass it to the next speaker.
Thank you for that, Melissa. And thank you also for sharing those additional resources. I did share Melissa's links there in the chat, and there are several QR codes. The presentations will be shared along with, for anyone who joined a little bit late, as well as the video recording of the webinar will be shared through the email for everyone who has registered. As long as we have your email, we'll be able to share that with you once the webinar is complete. And so moving on, next we have a great team actually from We Act for Environmental Justice. We have Sarah Salem, excuse me, the Director of Community Engagement for the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center, TICTAC, at We Act for Environmental Justice, and Shireen Cox, the Grant Specialist for the TICTAC at We Act for Environmental Justice. So thank you so much, and we look forward to your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Sada, she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships, or Community Engagement for the We Act TICTAC, and you'll be hearing from myself and Shireen Cox, our TICTAC Federal Grant Specialist. So Melissa talked a little bit about what the TICTAC is, and so we'll go a little bit more in depth, but here you'll see the logos of all of our partners. So for New Jersey, we're partnered with NJDEP, Melissa's amazing organization, and the South Ward Environmental Alliance. And what that means is our partners are helping us navigate and provide the services to the regions in which we're required and want to be supporting in the pursuit of these grants, but also bringing environmental justice projects into your community. Next slide. Awesome. So what's the TICTAC? What is a little bit of background? So the map to the left you'll see is the United States, and this is how the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has broken up the country into 10 distinct regions. And we in New York and New Jersey sit in Region 2, which also includes Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The initiative of the EJ Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or TICTACs, came from Justice 40 Initiative, which was an executive order from President Biden that required that 40% of overall benefits from federal investments, including the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, go towards and support marginalized, underserved, and overburdened communities dealing with pollution and climate change. And so this was launched, actually, we're just into our second year. It was announced April of 2023, and we were awarded in July of 2023. So we've been open for about a year, and in our first year, we've been learning a lot. So across the United States, there's 18 TICTACs, there's 3 national TICTACs and the 15 regional ones. And for our region, We Act and our partners are your providers of these services. Next slide. So the grant period, like I mentioned, we're a 5-year free service to the community. It's really important to know that we're not a pass-through entity, so we don't have grants to give out, but rather we're a service you can utilize to get the grants you want. Different from other organizations who are awarded the TICTAC, we're focused on all types of grants. So while we will be supporting you mostly with federal grants, we are able and want to make sure you take advantage of any funding source that could help you meet your environmental justice needs in your community. We serve, as I said, New York, New Jersey, and the 8 Indian nations of New York. And we're a small but mighty team. So myself, I'm the Director of Community Engagement. We have Jordana Vanderselt, who's our Director of Operations, Shireen Cox, who's our Federal Grant Specialist, and Casey Parsons, who is our Communications Manager. So as I mentioned, we build out curriculum. So anything from helping you understand how to start a grant to doing on-demand technical assistance. We have a resource library that we're building up, and we do in-person regional convenings, which have not launched just yet, but we are hoping to have our first one in the spring of 2025. It's worth noting our years are offset from the calendar year. So we are going July into June. So we're just ending our first year. Next slide. So who do we serve? I would say the overarching criteria is that we serve environmental justice communities. And the way we're determining if an organization is an environmental justice community is by utilizing something called the CJS tool, or in addition, the EJ Screener tool. These are two federal tools that help identify communities that are most overburdened by environmental injustice. Within those communities, the kind of entities we can serve are nonprofits, community-based organizations, philanthropic and civic organizations, underserved communities, rural and remote communities, faith-based churches, educational institutes, individuals, disadvantaged businesses, local tribes and state agencies, U.S. territories, utility providers, and healthcare providers as well. I'd say the only priority we have is that we want to be focusing on our EJ communities. Next slide. So what can we provide? We have a great group of technical experts, and each of them has their own background that they're providing free services and support with. So first, we help folks navigate in applying to grants. This can focus on federal, state, or city grants, philanthropic grants. So while we'll be most able to help you with federal grants, for example, EPA grants, if you come with us with a USDA grant, we'll do the work to understand it and figure out how to support you in applying for those, for example, and private and philanthropic individuals as well. When we're talking about grant training, we're talking about everything from identifying a grant to writing the grant to reviewing it. We will not write your grant, but we will edit your grant. We also support with community organizing and engaging with decision makers, EJ policy and regulatory analysis, building partnerships in the community, energy justice and energy projects, really understanding environmental health and justice and climate health and justice trainings, doing an assessment of your environmental needs, and post-grant management. Next slide. So really the purpose is to support folks with grant assistance, provide community engagement, and make sure that the materials are accessible, meaning we want to kind of take the barriers of entry into going to these federal, state, or local grants. We want folks to be able to build the projects and feel comfortable and excited to take on these new opportunities. And I will now pass it to Shireen, who will give you just a bit of an idea of how you can start to learn about what grants to apply for.
Good afternoon. So if you could pass it to the next slide, please. So I put together 9 factors to help you, that may help you decide whether or not to respond to a particular funding opportunity. These questions may help you think strategically and increase your competitiveness when you do decide to respond and prepare your proposal. I'm presenting 9 factors with questions to ask yourself as you review a potential funding opportunity, and I'll quickly go over each one as well as some things you may want to consider. So for factor 1, align strategies. Does your proposal align with our institutions and the sponsor's strategic plan? Are the proposed outcomes consistent with the funder's strategic objectives and priorities? If your response is no to any of these questions, it's recommended that you select another funding opportunity. If your organizational mission, vision, or project goals are not aligned with the funder's mission and vision, you run the risk of your proposal not being reviewed by the sponsor. Factor number 2, relationship with the sponsor or funder. Are we in good standing with the sponsor? Have we done all of our final reporting and and closed out our grants? Is the funder seeking new applicants to apply? Have we discussed the proposal project with the program? Have we discussed the proposed project or program with the funder? If you're not sure if you're in good standing, you can contact the sponsor to talk to them about your proposal and confirm your eligibility to apply. Factor number 3 is competitiveness. How many projects is the funder planning to support with this funding opportunity? How many were awarded during the last round? What type of projects are they looking for? And does the project lead have an established track record in this field? The funding opportunities review criteria is a great resource to help determine your proposal's competitiveness. It clarifies what the sponsor is looking for. Next slide, please. Factor number 4, potential collaborators. Does the sponsor want less experienced project leads on the project? Do we have well-established collaborations? Who in our network can effectively contribute to the success of this project or lend credibility? Well-established collaborations aren't always necessary, as exemplified by the projects mentioned earlier during this presentation. If you have the appropriate expertise doing the work, you could be just as successful in your proposal. Factor number 5, expertise. Is the study team's expertise in line with the funder's grant program goals? Are they looking for a new initiative or building on a prior program? Have we or our collaborators been awarded projects within the field of study previously? If your organization doesn't have all the expertise needed for the program or project, this is where advisors and collaborators can fill in the gaps. Factor number 6 is evidence. Do we have relevant and convincing research available to support our solution? Why is it important to solve this issue? Is there a third-party data to demonstrate the need for the proposed project? What activities will address the issue, and how do we evaluate their effectiveness? This is an important factor as it answers for the funder, why is this project or program important? Other types of evidence could be newspaper or magazine articles, TV news coverage, screenshots of maps like the ones Sada mentioned, the CGIS tool or EJ screen, to show the community issues or EJ issues or the population demographics. Next slide, please. Factor number 7, capacity. Do you have time to write a compelling proposal? Is there anybody to help you write it? How many other applications within your organization are currently being prepared? And does the project lead have the bandwidth to finish the project? These are just some questions to consider for your capacity. It really boils down to, do you have time to do this? Is it worth the effort? If you have too many active projects within your organization, it may be a concern for the funder. Do you really have the bandwidth to meet the deliverables? And factor number 8, financial support. Is a funder asking for cost share matching sources? Do you have that available? If not, how do you get them? Does the funder require matching funds from an external source? Is the grant worth the effort? So is the available budget sufficient? Should you scale down? If you do scale down, is it a significant enough project for the sponsor to fund? Again, some things to consider. And factor number 9, resources. Do we have the necessary resources to commit to the project as required by the sponsor? As some federal grants require you to have a certain infrastructure. and programmatic support. And if you don't have it, what's it going to take to secure them? Does the project or program need donated sources like technology or devices? And what resources can be leveraged from your collaborators, your partners on the project? Gauging resources available after you get the award is another important factor for the funder. It gives them confidence you can manage the grant funds and complete the project within the project period. These are just some of the questions to ask yourself, and doing this assessment may help you strategize what funding opportunities you select and how you put together a compelling and competitive proposal. Next slide, please. I just want to touch on the community change grant and what resources are available. We at the We Act TIC-TAC can help you determine if the community change grant is a good fit for your organization if you're thinking about applying for this opportunity. If you're considering submitting a proposal, we also recommend that you contact the Community Change Technical Assistance Program, the CCTA. They have great resources on their websites, including the webinars, FAQs, and also they've just uploaded some worksheets that can help you write each component of the grant application. So really strongly encourage you to check that out. And if you're located in a disaster-prone area, you can contact the CCERTA that will also help you put your proposal or provide technical assistance. So that's it for me. I'll pass it on back to Sara.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Shireen. So how to engage. We have a quick survey, intake form rather, that you can complete. Shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes. Once you complete that, utilizing this QR code, we'll schedule a 30-minute intake call with you where myself and my colleague Jordana will learn a little bit more of what you need and then direct you to the technical support you would be best fit for. So complete the short survey, look for a connection email, we'll schedule the 30-minute, or you will rather, we'll give you a link to schedule the 30-minute intake call, and then we'll follow up with next steps. Next slide. And just some things that we already have, if you visit us on our website, some courses or some trainings we already provided in our first year include community solar model and resources that was focused on New York, New Jersey. There was an environmental justice and community organizing led by our folks at SWIA. We did an introduction to the Justice 40 and CJES tool. We also did organizational growth building and sustainable futures led by NJDEP. And we also did an environmental health and justice leadership training on clean air and climate. These are all recorded and sources you can watch at your own time. And next slide. And how to stay in contact. So again, please do utilize our technical assistance QR code. We'll drop the link also on the website or in the chat. Also find out about upcoming trainings, learn about upcoming funding sources. We do that on our website, but also if you sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter, we try to make a very short and sweet overview of funding opportunities for our region. And with that, I will pass it back to you all. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Sara and Shireen. I appreciate the conversation, and I'm excited actually about the Q&A session. We do have about 15 minutes or so left in our webinar time for question and answer, and I will ask all of the speakers to come back on camera so that we can answer some questions. We do have a few from both the chat and the Q&A. And while folks are coming back on camera, I will go ahead and jump in. So the first one that we received was, I think it was a doozy to get us sort of like everybody to wake up. It's a Monday, and to have a great a Q&A session here. But I'm going to read it, and I think I'm going to take a little bit of a stab at answering, but I do want to give the opportunity for others to answer as well. It says EVs, e-bike energy charging stations, EV car batteries, tires, etc., have been studied and proven that the technology doesn't solve the issues we face as far as climate control, air pollution, precious resource mining, child labor, etc. Has the state and energy companies representing the state of New Jersey carefully studied these environmental hazards and also how it impacts our communities, families, and our future generations? Or is this a cash grab to expand budgets, produce economic growth? And so I think there are a few different points to this particular question as well. But just sort of taking on that first component about EVs not being a solution, I'll be the first one to say that electric vehicles aren't going to save us from car-centric culture. That's probably the main issue that we have in the United States is our car-centric culture, the way we've created our cities and towns, the suburban idealized lifestyle that we've set up over the last 60 years is a huge component of why we're in this problem to begin with. And EVs are not going to save us from that. However, to the point I think Melissa illustrated excellently is that our current system is killing people right now with pollutants, as well as the greenhouse gases that are being emitted. And so finding ways to have more community-centered electric vehicle opportunities, in addition to encouraging the state and our federal government to increase public and mass transit, are really the solutions that we need to be looking for. But we don't expect that cars are not going to be utilized and our car culture is going to sort of disappear overnight. And so EVs are a great transition for us to be able to still live in a world that's very car-centric, but also reduce the greenhouse gas and co-pollutant emissions that are being emitted by internal combustion engines, as well as helping people who currently have limited mobility and limited access to take advantage of opportunities, especially with the funding sources that Melissa, Sarah, and Shireen just shared with us. But I do want to give others of the panelists an opportunity to weigh in on this, on maybe some of the other issues that were raised in the question.
I could start, Nicole, and thank you for that explanation. That was very well said. So the state certainly considers impacts to residents, communities, businesses, the environment in all its actions. There's a lot of research, a lot of stakeholdering that goes into things before we develop plans like this. I know a big concern when we talk about transitioning to electric vehicles is, aren't we just moving the emissions from the tailpipe to the power plants? Like, how is that helping us, right? And EVs, even when you do consider emissions from the power plants, EVs are still about 70% cleaner than gas vehicles, even when counting those emissions. So overall, they are a cleaner source of transportation. And as our power grid relies on more renewable sources, that number will only improve. And as Nicole said, we are very car-centric. That's part of the reason for eMobility, right? We want to get those personal vehicles off the road, and then people can rely more on these shared use transportation to help lower their carbon emissions as well. And I don't know if any other panelists have their hands up.
No. Just thinking about the resource extraction component of that, I think that that's another important component that we need to advocate for at the state and the federal level is how are we recycling these components and across the board, not only just our EVs, but cell phones, et cetera. There's many metals, rare earth elements that are currently going to waste. They're not being properly recycled and reused and put back into the system. And so developing that, I think the big C capitalism is always sometimes a roadblock to positive change, but proper advocacy can be an important component to that. So in the interest of time, we're going to move on since none of the other panelists have jumped in. But this question, I think it's directly for you, Colleen, for the Jersey City presentation. What % of the total cost of service does the fare cover for the Jersey City presentation?
Yes, so the fare really doesn't cover the full cost. The program's mostly funded by the city with some help from our grant program. Any income that is received from the fair does get rolled back into the program to extend it a bit, but it really relies on the city fronting that money for it. I know from working with Ben and Circuit that a lot of these companies recommend charging a minimal fare so that people will keep their rides. If you have a free service, there's a larger chance that people will book a ride and either not show up or cancel last minute. And that affects the other users of the ride because of that algorithm. So it might increase their wait time and it might mess up the routes a bit. So that minimal $2 fare or whatever the cost is just helpful. You know, you have your $2 on the line, you're going to show up for your ride when you do that. Is that right, Ben? Do you have anything to add to that? I know you work more closely with Circuit.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. That was perfectly stated.
Okay, great. So there, the next question from Sharonda with Operation Grow, I think is maybe a combo one with another one that was recently put into the chat about or into the Q&A about the technical component, right? That a lot of the presenters were talking about the funding component, which is huge. We don't want to downplay that. Thank you very much. But there's also this idea of how can I myself, I'm not a mobility specialist. I'm not, vehicularly blessed in my knowledge and things like that. So if I had a community group, how would I be able to do this? What's some of the technical challenges that some of the organizations might insist in? Sharonda actually asked sort of, I'm all in, right? How do I sign up? So any of the panelists who want to kind of jump in and answer that question, either of those questions, please do.
I mean, I can speak to this if other folks don't have anything else to say. I think I would just first reserve that I'm sure I'm going to forget some stuff here. I think it really involves, before the technical piece, kind of understanding what you want to do. One of the things that we're working on with Colleen and Melissa and a few others is kind of creating some sort of a flow chart or guidelines, not a procedure, more of a guidelines for like the things that a community might want to do in this space, and really needing to understand like what the needs are from the community, what the community says that their needs are at that point, and then understanding what the technical solutions might be in that space. And I think VIA and Circuit and other vendors like this can speak specifically, but the range of services that they're going to provide is really on a range. It's on a whole spectrum of what they can provide, from full up vehicles to the actual software as a service, to maybe even just providing the software and letting the vehicles be managed in another capacity. And so there's really a lot of technical considerations. I would say that it's selection of a vendor in that space, but then it's also understanding I think what the infrastructure needs are going to be. It's really been one of the toughest things for us to figure out when it comes to infrastructure location, operational location, and then utility location, and understanding how best to make all those work sometimes when there's significant constraints on the footprints of those that may or may not be overlapping geographically. So I think there's a lot of technical considerations that I probably can't even begin to answer on the fly like this. So that's something that we can talk more at length. I don't know if others have more to add to that. My off the cuff answer to that one.
Anyone else about just the sort of basics of how to get started, as well as some of those technical considerations that Shireen and Miso and Ben were just discussing?
Just
Colleen,
to add on top, partnerships. I think that I put in the chat a few minutes ago that I had neglected in thanking a few key partners. Sometimes I get too lost in what I'm discussing, and I forget to thank the people that really are integral in making this happen. The people I mentioned before were the core working group that workshopped this out at RMI. So DEP, et cetera, has been with us from the beginning. But Chuck Feinberg from NJ Clean Cities Coalition, and then the Mercer County planners, Mercer County Greater TMA, but then NJPEEC and RPA as well. I mean, we just couldn't have done it with all these folks, and are continuing to do it with all these folks. And so it's literally a wide coalition. I could not have done it without all those folks.
Yeah, I'll add, as far as getting started in your own programs, we are developing sort of a needs assessment or planning toolkit that people could use. It's in the works right now, but it should be going up on our website in the coming weeks. So I will certainly post about that, but it'll really be background information on where to start. So you're doing your community research, you need to find out, is there a need in your community for this type of transportation service? Can this transportation service be used to fill that need? And then where do you go from there? So that also has to do with the survey question I had earlier on to for folks to fill out to help us structure that initial funding opportunity for planning for e-mobility.
Great, thank you, Colleen. So actually circling back to Ben really quickly, another question from Miso, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Now it's almost time for lunch. Now you're just making me hungry. But one of the questions was, what are the advantages and trade-offs between a scheduled shuttle service versus an on-demand service?
It's a great question, and it kind of goes to some of the points that Colleen was making initially, and that several of us were getting to throughout our presentations, that you really have to be flexible and understanding what services. Some of these are evolving as we go, right? So it's not easily to define what sometimes micro transit and fixed versus demand and all this. This gibberish sometimes sounds like gibberish coming out, but the point is that there really are a lot of ideal solutions depending on the given situation that you have, and there's a lot of pros and cons to fixed versus demand. If I would say, this is probably me, not transportation expert speaking, but I would say that from my perspective, if you know the routes, if you know the front and the back end, and you know the personnel, you know the people that you're going to be transporting, and you know some of the timing, then you probably are going to want to opt for as much fixed route as you can, just so you can schedule and know what's happening. That being said, a lot of the software platforms and the things that we've been discussing and our current lifestyles kind of tend to dictate more of an on-demand type situation. That can add wait times, and we've referenced fares and the lack thereof and what that can do. So there's literally hours and days of conversation sometimes on a case-by-case basis. Literally emailing right now someone talking about something that's just slightly outside of the coverage area. It was a one-off event, but it's going to be happening every now and then. So it's kind of fixed route, but it's kind of on demand because the time's going to be changing. So there's a lot of them that's a little bit of both. That's why it's really good, I think, to have both a diverse fleet. A fleet can operate in multiple temperature modalities, but also geographical constraints, whether it's tight streets, maybe a limited service vehicle like the gyms, but also bigger streets and bigger highways and bigger vehicles, but also the types and the modes of the platforms that we're using, the modes of service, the models, I'm sorry, is the word I was struggling to find there, the models that we're utilizing, whether it's either on demand or fixed route. And that I think that if you have the diverse fleet, you're going to be able to actively respond to whether it's fixed route or on demand. But in theory, you could do it with one vehicle if you don't have geographic or roadway restrictions. I think it really just depends, just to kind of circle back to what the mission that you're trying to accomplish. If you know the information and you can do fixed route, I would say do it. If you can't, you might have to do more on demand, and there's more support in that space as well.
Great, thank you for that. I think it probably boils down to know your audience, right? So who is it you're serving? Where's the area? And in a smaller geographical location, somebody who's working in a real neighborhood level, there might be a little bit more flexibility there, a little bit more ability to know where people are going, to the grocery store, to laundromat, et cetera, to a transit center. And in a wider area, there might need to be a little bit more sort of that on-demand service. That's interesting. Thank you for that, Ben. Coming back around to a question we had about what student climate activists, what can student climate activist groups do to advance this cause? I think, Melissa, you actually started to answer this a bit, and so I do want to give you an opportunity to talk from that perspective of what can groups do, to sort of advance this. Is it outside the realm of those groups to be trying to get this funding, the community change grants and some of the others that you mentioned, or should they be going to an established community group? What are you thinking as far as what student activists might be able to do to help further this?
So I think there's different ways, and this is like, to me, any other climate environmental conversation. You know, the elements are very similar. So, you know, if this is your passion, first, of course, it's what can be done on your campus. So does your campus have transportation routes? You know, who could you be speaking with? Most of the student groups have advisors. You know, most colleges and universities have clubs, ombudsmen. You know, so who could you be talking to about e-mobility on campus, accessible, affordable electric and campus electric transportation? Um, you know, just speaking from my experience, I know going to like a campus college sometimes is very difficult to even get into town if you don't have a car to to buy your groceries. Like, and so then you have everyone sort of scrambling to get a car. And then depending on the size of the university, it may cost you a lot. They may not let you have a car as a freshman. So I think that universities are sort of prime places to pilot e-mobility projects. Outside of the campus, I think it's important, again, more people have to know about this. More people have to feel connected to the issue and activated by the issue in the way that makes sense to them. So students have a different audience maybe than, you know, environmental organizations do. You know, we may talk to students, but we're not students, we're nonprofits. So I think, you know, students, young people have platforms, have ways of conveying information that I think is necessary to really get information disseminated in a broad way. Because as I mentioned, it's something, the narrative is something we've really struggled with, you know, as a movement and as a sector, really connecting with people, you know, who have everyday issues and who are not paid, you know, to do this work. So I think that's another really, that cannot be understated, how much we just need messaging about why it's important to get, you know, fossil fuel burning vehicles off the road. And, you know, our focus as an organization has always been heavy duty vehicles because they burn diesel, which is, you know, kind of you know, it's just very deadly to human health. And so, you know, it takes time and effort to educate people on why diesel is bad and where it even is in their communities, right? They have to see it and acknowledge it and then know that it's not good and then know that there's a solution. So that education coming from students, I think is one key way.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Did any of the other speakers wanted to take a stab at that? There was another question from Lillian, who said that they recently moved to New Jersey, glad to find the initiatives happening and hoping the ideas will expand across the state. Is there any e-mobility companies working already in the Wayne area? And I do not have that information. Colleen, would you have any information about how these programs are expanding across the state? If you have any sort of like knowledge about how things are expanding?
Yeah, so I'm mostly familiar with our own e-mobility grant program, and we haven't funded any projects in the Wayne area. I think, is that Passaic County area, North Jersey? It doesn't mean they're not there. It's very possible they have mobility services there, but maybe they're not electric, so it hasn't come on my radar. A good resource would be your city and county websites, or your transportation management associations often have information on all of the transportation services in your area. So I could find a link and drop it in the chat, or we could share it out afterwards to see if there's anything.
Great, thank you for that. So just finally, logistics. As I mentioned, the recording, we have been recording both the presentations and the Q&A, and we will be sharing the recording as well as the slides available to the participants. And excuse me. And so again, if you were registered, then you'll be able to get the links that we have here, as well as contact information that are on all of our participants' individual slides as well. I think Miso asked another question. Oh, adding more information for the student. Thank you very much, Miso. And I will be able to also put a way to reach me through NJPEEC here at powerforall@njpeek.org, since I don't have slides, if there are any questions for me through NJPEEC. But thank you for your time. We're just a few minutes over, but we appreciate all of you attending and sharing this incredible information. And we do hope that you'll take advantage of these resources and that you will also share them with other organizations and groups in your network who might be looking for opportunities to increase accessibility and mobility, even on a micro scale. So I want to thank Colleen and Ben, Shireen, Sarah, Melissa, and all of our speakers, as well as our incredible background support, Isabel and Cassie from the New Jersey League of the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters, NJLCV, for your assistance, and all of you for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great time.